Alright, Brian wanted me to shoot a video of my lids. Now, I love this lid. It's not plastic, it's not fiberglass, I'm not sure what it's made out of. But we were at a club meeting one time, and a guy was getting out of commercial beekeeping, and I don't know how many of these he had, probably 100, let's just say. And he had even let them get out near a brush pile, and some of them were melted and tore up, and he was selling them for $3 a piece. And I wish I would have got every one of them, but I ended up maybe getting about 20 total. But these are really good rain covers, and I really do like them. They got a little track here to keep them raised up off your inner lid, and I'm going to tell you why I really like that feature. And that's about the only features they have about it, and they keep the rain out of your hive. And they're really good when you lay them down on the ground. There's plenty of height on them that I don't put my boxes down in here. I kind of turn my box sideways and set it up on the edge, and it's plenty strong that it can handle a couple 100 pounds of honeysuckers. So this is the lid I really like. That's my rain cover. My other rain covers that I have, I just went and bought a roll of house flashing, siding flashing. It's about this wide. It's a little bit wider than this, but it's like a 75-foot or 100-foot roll. And I just lay it out, get me a marker, start marking, and I mark it a little long. As you can tell, it's a couple inches long because I use it as kind of a roof over my front landing board also. But I make it just wide enough so I don't waste any, and long enough. Matter of fact, I think it's this wide the roll is, and the roll goes that way 100 foot long, and it's just this wide. And it's just wide enough that you can bend this over about a 1/4 inch, bend everything over about a 1/4 inch. I just cut my corners, bend them over and flap them over. And that's what I use as a rain cover. I use a cinder block because it's got a good hand hold for my holder, for my my weight to go on top. You know, sometimes we get 60-mile-an-hour winds, and if that down there just has brood and you have 2 or 3 boxes of honey, it gets real top heavy, the ground gets soft, cinder block might sink just a little bit. This is going to take care of that problem. This is going to take care of your lid blowing off, and it's also going to take care of hopefully your hive blowing over. It'll help hold it down. But I like it. These come up and flare up at the top, so they're pretty easy to get a hold of and just toss on the ground. Okay, so there's my rain cover, just a piece of flashing, that's all it is. This thing cost me maybe $1. This is where I store my queen excluders. I'm very picky about when I use my queen excluders. I just use them just for a little amount of time, and that's a long story, but this is where I store them. The reason is I don't want to be carrying 30 or 40 queen excluders back. They get heavy, they tear up my vehicle, I can tear them up, and I have to store them somewhere else, and why not just store them right here? Another reason why I like storing them right here is kind of what that lid does. It has that groove to hold it up off your lid. I'm sorry, that rain cover has that little groove to help hold it up off the lid. It has that groove right in there, and it helps hold it up off of this piece of plywood here. I have a lid. Well, this doesn't have anything like that. So if I put my queen excluder there, it keeps this piece of metal, which is now wet from the morning dew, it keeps this piece of metal from sitting flat on that piece of plywood and sweating. I have removed these without a queen excluder and had a big old black moldy area from sweat. So that's why I keep my queen excluder here also. That's mainly a winter problem, is that sweating problem. That's where I store my queen excluder. This is my lid. Over at Pack Salvage in Fort Smith. 3/4 inch sheet of plywood, number 2s. There might be a little bit of damage to it. There might be some knots. But a 3/4 inch sheet of plywood, they're $20. And I can't remember how many lids. I guess you can get 10 lids out of it. I figure about $2 a lid. So I'd have to remeasure it and figure out what I did. I just bought me 5 sheets of plywood and cut me up a bunch of lids. I also use these on the bottom and on the top if I'm out robbing honey or if I'm out stealing frames. I can screw one of these to the bottom of a deep and have one on top, and when I put a frame in here, I can put the lid back on and seal that honey or whatever it is in there, and maybe it's a queen cell. And that's the way I transport that box, with a lid in the bottom on it so they can't get out. But all this lid is a 3/4 inch plywood. Don't get the chipboard, because when you pick it up, it peels off with that propolis. I hadn't had much trouble with this rotten. I don't even paint it. I just cut it up and I have me 10 lids quick. This lid, I just took this off so it's not stuck on very good. Like I said, it's 3/4 inch plywood. I hadn't had any trouble with it bowing. This is number 8 screen wire. I just stapled it on there and it's on top. I did initially have it on bottom like this so I could set my jars in here, and I put this lid on like this so I could set my jar, but I would come by to change my jar out and the jar was stuck in there. And I always had to wrestle with it, and sometimes I'd pop the lid off and then a bunch of angry bees would come out, and I didn't want to do that. And I realized when I set the lid on here, it was almost sitting right on top of the frames, and the bee couldn't come up and drink. And if you didn't set it all the way down in there and push it against that wire, the bee couldn't reach up in there and drink anyway. So I realized if you turn it over, have the wire on top, your jar just sits right there. The bees can come up in there in that entire area. They got 3/4 inches to work. That's plenty of room for them to work. And there can be 100 bees right there feeding on that jar. You put your spacers on and then put your lid on up here. That way your jars aren't sitting out in the sun all day. You're doing internal feeding, and you can come out at night and just take that lid off, pop those 2 jars off, put 2 new jars in. You can even put spare jars here. You can put tools here. You can do whatever you want to, because you got all this extra space. You can drill 9 holes if you want to and put 9 jars on here. But 2 jars, that's as much as I usually do, because sometimes they don't use it and I take it right back off. If this screen started getting propolized up during the winter, a heat gun, I wouldn't use a torch, it's a little too aggressive, but a heat gun or a hair dryer, you can hold this thing up and that propolis will come right off. Or if you put it in the freezer, you could probably just pop it with a hive tool and it'd pop right off also. But that's what I'll use for my tops. I don't have much different. My nukes are the same way. They're all made out of 3/4 inch plywood. I think I was able to make my nukes for $5 out of that 3/4 inch plywood. If they last 3 years, they last 3 years. That's cheaper than the cardboard ones. It's cheaper than anything you can buy. And I just throw a good layer of paint on them, and I got a little piece of metal flashing over the top of it. Same thing, I got a hole drilled in there to put jars on. So these are the 2 type of lids I use. I also have went to Pack Salvage. What is this thing, like 17 by 20? And I bought some 24, well, it might have been 20 by 20 inch tile, whatever size this is. It barely fits one way, this way, and this way it was too big. So I only had to do 1 cut on it and take that strip off, and that piece of flooring tile fit right on here. I put the flooring tile on there upside down with the shiny surface down. I have never had any trouble with that. We were afraid during the winter it would get too cold and sweat and all that kind of stuff. I never had any trouble with it. I was also afraid my hive tool would break it when I was trying to get it off. Never had any trouble with it. I can store it outside. If I go on up to 50 hives, I may do that. I may use my tiles again. The only thing is they don't have feeder holes. That's my only problem. But if I needed a top, I could grab it real quick and it worked. They have a tendency not to blow off because they're pretty heavy. So a tile is another option. But inner covers, I don't run inner covers at all, because usually they have the strip of wood around, and then they have a groove cut in it, and then they got a thin piece of plywood, and that piece of plywood in there is loose. Some of them are offset, some of them are not. People get confused. Some of them have entrances cut in them, some of them don't. But they have that groove all the way around it, and that is a great beetle hiding place. I don't know how many inner covers I have pulled off and knocked 100 beetles out of. I mean, beetle, 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 that is just a beetle house. So I don't do that. I just run a flat piece of plywood. Now what you got to watch out for on this is look at your frame depth. There needs to be about the space of a number 2 pencil. You ought to be able to almost lay a number 2 pencil here and put your lid on. If not, it depends on where you bought your boxes or if you built your boxes yourself. If your frames aren't set down in there, I think it's, I don't know what the spacing is of a number 2 pencil. It's not very big, but it's big enough that a bee can get up over the top of the frame. The reason I'm telling you this, if you put this on here, and I don't have much trouble with this, and the bee can't get up over the top of it, that is a great place for beetles to hide. And I have seen people, I've tucked their lids off, solid lids like this, and be hundreds of beetles. Why? Because they have a great hiding spot. Now, to fix that, you either make your grooves deeper so your frames fit down in there, and that'd be a nuisance, or you just get a little piece of strip of pine, popsicle sticks, and staple them on here just to raise your lid up a hair. And that way, now whatever you put around here needs to go all the way continuously so the bees can't get in and out. Or mites and other things can't, or beetles and stuff can't get in and out. It needs to be continual. But when I started building my boxes, I really made sure that my frame set down in there deep enough. And that's another thing, if these frames are sitting right on top of these frames and there's no spacing or very little, that's another beetle spot. I try to make sure my frame spacing between these frames and these frames are at least a pencil width apart. And if they're more than a pencil width apart, that's where people get drones being, they'll wax that up and they'll lay drones on there. When they pull the frame out, they jerk it out, they rip wax, they see that larvae, and it scares them for the first time beekeeper. So, when I started building my boxes, that's the stuff I really paid attention to. And now pretty much I build my own boxes, or if I buy some and I don't like them, I might modify them just a hair. You know, you can, like I said, put popsicle sticks or a piece of wood strip all the way around here to raise your lid, or you can do it right on this. And also, if this box, for some reason the frames are right at the bottom of the box, because they got the frames set so deep in there, you can put a strip all the way around this box to raise it up. But you don't want to go too much, and you don't want to go too little. Just like I said, too much and too little. Too much is more than a number 2 pencil. Too little is no space. You don't want a no space. You want some space. That's what I use as the lid. Now for my spacers, you can use another deep box for quart jars, or you can use a medium box for pint jars to feed on here. I don't like using my boxes that way because those boxes cost money and I need them. I'd rather them stay in out of the weather, not be out here in the weather just for a feeding spacer. So I just got 2x4s. The guy gave me a trailer load of treated 2x4s, and I just did one screw all the way around and made me a square 2x4 spacer and another square 2x4 spacer. That's all it is. It's just 2 stacks of 2x4s, and that's enough for a spacer for a quart jar. So that's my lids. Like I said, either I use the sheet metal flashing for a rain cover, and I put my queen excluder on here when I'm done, just like that. And I got a queen excluder for pretty much every hive. Make sure it's on there getting straight. And like I said, that concrete block flares out so I can get a hold of it. And there we go. Or I use this thing. But if you go to buy these out of the catalog, and you're thinking about running 20, 30, 40 hives, I think these are about 26 bucks. Shipping 30, so to get you a case of them would set you back pretty bad. Get you a roll of that, might cost you about 50 bucks, and you can probably make 50 of them out of it, and it'll set you back maybe $1 or $2 of flashing. And the way I cut this easy, like butter, is a hand grinder with a cutoff disc. And I cut my little corners, I do everything, and then at Home Depot, I'm not sure if they had to order it for me or not. They might have had some smaller ones, but they got flashing benders. They have some that are pliers that are only like 6 or 8 inches wide, but they also have some that are metal that I think are 18 inches, which just about will do the whole length on this. And on one side it's a 1/4 inch slot, and the other side it's a 3/4 inch slot. And you can just slide it over that and go bend the whole thing. Just that quick. And that way you have some nice clean bends on it. And they don't take up much room, they're easy to haul, and that's what I use for my rain covers. And you got to put some weight on there or those dudes will blow off.